Welcome, lady and gentlemen, to the June meeting of the Transit Committee. We are the New York City Transit Authority, MAB STOA, and Staten Island Rapid Transit Operating Authority. Once again, we are honored to have our Chairman and CEO, Joseph Lota, with us. Welcome again, Joe.
Thank you, Mark.
Do we have any public speakers?
No public speakers, sir.
What?
No public speakers.
Are you sure?
Yes.
If that's the if that's the case, we're going to turn this meeting right over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thomas Prendergast.
Minutes.
Oh, yes, the minutes of the last meeting from May are in the book. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve them. All in favor? Are there any changes to the work plan?
No.
Oh, this is a dull meeting. I can see it happening. All right, you ready, Tom?
Yes.
Okay, hit it.
Okay, operations report, Senior Vice President Carmen Bianco.
Good morning. Subway performance results for the month of April and the 12-month average where appropriate are as follows. Subway weight assessment. The 12-month rolling average for system-wide subway weight assessment was 78.5 in April of 2012, down 0.3 of a percentage point from 78.8 in April of 11. The IRT weekday weight assessment continues to improve for the third month in a row. It's up a half a percentage point in April of 2012 compared to April of 11. The Rail Control Center continues to improve its ability to function as a centralized rail control operation utilizing the ATS system. Moving on to on-time performance, system-wide weekday OTP was 85%. It's a decrease of 1.1 percentage point from 86.1 in April of 11. System-wide weekend OTP was 87.4. That's a decrease of 1.6% from 89 in 2011, April of 2011. Significant improvements in the number 7 line OTP and weight assessment continues again compared to April of 11. That's mainly due to comprehensive track and signal rehabilitation work that has been performed in the Steinway Tunnel. As was the case in March, IRT on-time performance in April was basically flat year over year. Frequent significant weekday GOs continued in April on the IRT. Two significant projects to point out. One was a reconstruction of the interlocking just north of Borough Hall on the Lex line, and which had slow speeds in effect for a couple of weeks, and also track reconstruction at 14th Street on the 7th Avenue line is also involved. And just to show you how delays can mount up, back in April we had a water main break at Chambers Street. And if you recall, last month I said that was one situation where we took the water the water receded quickly for us because we had just gone through there with fast track and cleaned all those drains. But even in an event like that, we had over 331 train delays as a result of that incident. So they mount up significantly where you're running such intense service like that. Moving on to weekday OTP for the BMT and the IND was down 0.7% and 3.4 percentage points respectively in April of 12 compared to April of 11. Again, attributed to more GOs on the Brighton and Queens Boulevard lines, which affected service on the B, the Q, the E, and the F, and also several operating incidents were involved. Moving on to mean distance between failure, decreased in the month of April at 184,739 miles. It was down 15.9% from 219,564 in April of 11. The 12-month average was 168,209. That's down 1.9% from 171,553 miles in the preceding 12 months. Key performance indicators, system-wide service KPI was 82.8. That's down 0.4% from 83.2 in April of 11. PES scores was 90.9. That's down a half a percentage point from 91.4 in April of 11. For Staten Island Railway, the service KPI is not reported, but their PES KPI was 88.1, up 1.6% from 86.5 in April of 11. We concluded our 8th installment of Fast Track on Friday, June 15th on the Lex line between Grand Central and 42nd Street, Grand Central, 42nd Street, and Atlantic Avenue. And we'll begin our 9th installment tonight on the 7th Avenue line between 34th Street, Penn Station, Atlantic Avenue, and South Ferry. And that concludes the Barclay Center. Thank you, sir. That concludes the operations report.
Any further questions or cross-examinations for Carmen?
Can I make a comment on the operations?
Yeah, it's your constitutional right.
I know these are a snapshot in time, these figures, but a 30.5% drop in MDBF on the IRT, what happened in April, I should say, that merited such a precipitous drop?
Well, one of the one of the issues, what we were dealing with in April, was actually comparing it to April of last year. If you notice, last year they had over half a million miles on the 142s, I believe, and that, if you look at the 10-year history for that car class, they average about 200,000, 210,000 miles a month, and here we had. So we're comparing ourselves to the stellar month, and you see the results. So it's a difficult comparison when you're doing month-to-month comparisons.
And speaking of the car results, am I reading these figures incorrectly? Because normally you don't have a seventh figure on the MDBF, but on the 160s you're in the almost 2 million miles MDBF. Is that possible, or is there an added figure there?
No, I think it's 800,000.
I think there's an extra figure there then, correct?
No,
No.
Michael, the chief mechanical officer.
Yeah.
Well, you've got
696.
almost 2 million on April 2011.
What chart are you on?
Car
316.
316. And you have it down again on the 160s
right.
for the E's and the F's. Did they get almost 3 million miles MDBF? Or is there an added figure there? I mean, it would be great if it was 767, much less 2,767,000.
You guys don't think we read these charts, do you?
So you're.
Oh, no, that's the line. That's the number 2 line, 1.9 monthly MDBF.
You're
That's not
talking about the
fleet.
160s,
The
right,
fleet.
Andrew?
Yeah,
the
the
fleet
fleet.
had a
Almost 2 million?
860. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're going by the lines. That's
So
done.
that's a subset of the entire
Right.
fleet.
It's calculated by RTO. The
So-
MDBF on the previous
So on
page
that
is
line, they performed stellar,
That's
in
right.
other words.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Well, to get an 860 number, you got to have numbers well above that on some of the parts.
2,700,000, though?
Just the 800,000 number is something.
That's what I'm saying.
It's a very good number.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was a good price. It's a very good price.
Absolutely.
Safety, Cheryl Kennedy.
Okay. The safety results were as follows. The subway customer accident rate decreased by 7.9% for the 12-month period. In the month of March, the accident rate decreased by 9.5%, moving to 2.67 per million subway customers from a rate of 2.95 in March of last year. The employee lost time accident rate increased by 8% for the month of April 2012 versus April 2011. The rolling 12-month rate was 3.30, unchanged from the previous 12-month period. There were 103 confirmed fires for the month of April, up 25.6% from the previous year. The increase was seen in right-of-way tie and debris fires in outdoor locations. Additionally, fires decreased over the last 12 months by 9.6%. 99% of all fires were categorized as being low or average in severity for the month of April.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any questions for Cheryl? If not, our amiable, hardworking, and extremely competent Chief Joseph Fox. Amiable isn't usually something that we say about our chief police officers, you know.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you to the committee and to the MTA. Good morning. For the month of May, there were 239 major felonies committed within the Transit Bureau, which is an increase of 12.2% or 26 more crimes than in May 2011. Compared to May 2011, robberies in May 2012 decreased by 3. Felony assaults decreased by 6, while grand larcenies during this period increased by 28. There was an average of 53.9 crimes in May per week, 2012, compared to May 2011's weekly average of 47.6. Still, in a system which averages over 5 million commuters every weekday, There were only 7.7 crimes per day in May 2012. By the way, so far this year, 32% of our crimes occurred in Manhattan, 39% in Brooklyn, 13% in Queens, and 16% in the Bronx. Those percentages are generally consistent with our prior years, 2010 and 2011. Transit Bureau officers and COs continue to meet this relatively new challenge with innovative programs, well-thought-out strategic deployment, and a continued increase in enforcement contacts. Year-to-date arrests have increased 5.7%, and fare evasion summonses have increased by 10.4%. During the week of May 7th to May 13th, transit officers effected 1,369 arrests, made 5,917 enforcement contacts, and removed 19 knives from perpetrators in that week alone. This was done as part of our Operation Toolbox, which utilizes every available officer and resource. These operations are now standard and conducted on a regular basis. During this operation, also, 384 wanted persons were apprehended. Also, the Transit Bureau conducted an operation on May 31st, which specifically targeted fare evasion. On that day, officers made 220 arrests and issued 389 tabs for fare evasion. Team-led enforcement operations are now an integral part of our Transit Bureau's standard crime-fighting operation. The Bureau has been actively combating crime trends throughout the year. At each presentation I have made before this committee, I have described the various initiatives the commanding officers have taken to combat crime in our subways. The NYPD is taking a multi-bureau approach to fighting subway crime. The Police Commissioner has recently allocated additional resources in order to combat crime in our subways. And the Transit Bureau is now being supplemented with police officers who are normally assigned outside the transit system. There are 3 separate multi-bureau crime prevention operations: Auxiliary Police Officer Surge, Patrol Service Operation Impact, and Transit Crime Prevention Unit Initiative. The department now includes a significant transit component to our Patrol Service Bureau Operation Impact program. Officers throughout the city are consistently conducting regular transit visits, increasing uniformed police presence in our subways. Their presence has already made a positive impact on crime. Also, every Friday evening, transit auxiliary police officers are joined by auxiliary police officers who are normally assigned to street patrol to conduct auxiliary surge operations. These officers conduct patrol in 7 pre-designated subway stations throughout the city. At these stations, transit auxiliary officers patrol the inside of the station, while patrol auxiliary officers patrol the stairways and entrances. While assigned to these stations, officers distribute crime prevention literature and serve as a highly visible crime deterrent. In addition, every weekday, a team of transit crime prevention officers and crime prevention officers from outside the Transit Bureau report to a different borough. There, these officers spend an entire shift inside various subway stations within that borough, distributing crime prevention materials to passengers. Being supplied with additional officers provides us an ability to reach out to the riding public and help them take appropriate measures in protecting themselves against thieves. Their presence also suppresses crime, as they are in NYPD uniform. We believe these officers are invaluable because a critical component to combating these crimes of opportunity is the promotion of awareness. It's essential that we communicate to the public that these thefts of electronics are often preventable. I'd like to thank Mr. Joe Loda and the MTA for assisting us in this effort in many ways, most recently the placement of approximately 2,200 posters specifically reminding riders to safeguard their handheld electronic items. This is a considerable expansion of the current campaign. Thank you. Of course, these initiatives are in addition to the continued enforcement efforts being made by Transit Bureau officers. Transit police officers are out in the subways every day combating crime. Officers are actively looking for criminals, often putting themselves at risk in order to apprehend these perpetrators. For instance, on May 4th, 2012, Police Officer Jermaine Hodge and Officer Yves David of Transit District 33 stopped Matt Lewis, a 20-year-old man who walked through an emergency exit gate without paying his fare at the Rockaway Avenue station in Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn. When the officers arrested Lewis, they searched him and found a loaded .22 caliber revolver inside his pants pockets. Officers Hodge and David's actions that they took a gun off our subways and out of our community. In prior meetings before this committee, I have also spoken about the Transit Bureau's pursuit of criminals who take advantage of sleeping subway passengers. We're conducting operations that specifically target such criminals. Officers actively search for potential perpetrators that exhibit trademark behavior that identifies them as this sort of offender. On June 17th, Police Officer John Bartley and Officer Michael Thomas of Transit District 2 Anti-Crime were conducting such an operation. While on patrol, they observed Lakeem Bristow hovering over a male that had fallen asleep on a stop train at the 14th Street and 8th Avenue station in Manhattan. The team saw Bristow remove money from the sleeping passenger's pocket and then run off the train. Officers Thomas and Bartley later apprehended Bristow and arrested him. When they searched him, they recovered the victim's money and 2 razor blades, tools often used by such offenders. Later, it was discovered that Mr. Bristow had been arrested 23 times in the past. Apprehending one of these offenders can have a sizable impact on crime, as they are often career criminals who perpetrate crimes on a regular basis. These operations are not the only way we are fighting this type of crime. Transit Bureau is hard at work circulating information, identifying these criminals, which leads directly to their arrests. In one such case, on May 8th, Transit District 11 Anti-Crime Team, Sergeant John Fischetti, P.O. Douglas Lee, Joel Gouch, and Robert O'Brien were conducting an inspection of the 161st Street Yankee Stadium station. While conducting the inspection, the team spotted a male later identified as Francisco de la Cruz standing in the station's mezzanine. Immediately, they recognized him from a wanted poster displayed on the district's Crime Information Center, which was disseminated at roll calls. This perpetrator stole money from a sleeping passenger 4 days before, on May 4th, at the Burnside Avenue station. In the course of this larceny, the passenger woke and was slashed by the suspect during a struggle. Subsequently, the District 11 Anti-Crime Team apprehended the perp and arrested him for this crime. Arrests like these are the result of proper communication, teamwork, which are 2 fundamentals of good police work. I'd like to thank the committee, Mr. Loda, Carmen Bianco, and Tom, and any questions you may have, I welcome.
Thank you, Joe, for your extremely thorough report. Chairman Loda.
I have an additional report to have in the crime area. A little over a month ago, I met with the police commissioner to talk about assaults against our bus drivers as well as fare evasion. And the police commissioner later today will be discussing through his public information office more information about this, but let me give you some of the highlights. In the last 28 days, members of service, both uniform and non-uniform in NYPD throughout the city have performed 996 bus inspections. What that means is on and off a bus at any different point in time along the route. Year to date, these officers have effected 1,205 theft of service arrests. This represents a 72% increase year over year in just the 28 days that they have had this enhanced service. I will leave the rest of this information for the police commissioner and the deputy commissioner for public information to discuss, but I do want to highlight that that the NYPD has been looking at this on a borough-by-borough basis and will continue their strategic enforcement in helping the MTA and the Transit Authority in particular on its revenue-related issues.
Chief Fox, you know, a lot of us here in the subways all the time and on the buses, and if we see a fare evasion, what do you suggest we do? What should we do?
Well, I wouldn't suggest taking individual independent action, but it's I mean we have chains of communication from all the way at all levels of the MTA with conductor to cop, us in this room here, and all the COs as well. Like for example, I think Andrew, you developed a pretty good relationship with the borough commander Jason Wilcox, so I think we could. Calling 911, of course, letting us know, because then we could see if it's a spot where we see repeated trends. It's an important part of our enforcement, and we use all the help we can get, and citizens.
We're all seeing this. I saw 5 in the last week, 5 fare evaders. Should I have broadcast the description in the subway? Yeah. Should I have broadcast this description to Inspector Wilcox?
Definitely, because if it's something,
By the time he would do anything about it, the guy would be long gone, right?
but we could put more patrols or more, undercover operations in that station based on what we're hearing. Because
It's also location related. I think you'll find that the 5 that you saw, are they all basically in the same location?
No, all over the
throughout?
place.
Okay. It's important to get the location because it's these types of
But
evasions.
fare evaders don't generally just do it one at a time. They're generally ingrained fare evaders. So if you can give a description and a location, then enforcement, and either to the chief or to our people, we'll pass it on.
What do we do about observing a sleeping passenger? Do we do anything about that?
that's a interesting question, Mark, because I had just said not to take independent action with a fare evasion, but a sleeping passenger is not committing a crime. A sleeping passenger is a decent person who's taking advantage of a safe system. So anything that you think can be done without being intrusive, of course, from a few feet away, excuse me, sir, are you okay? That's one of the things our officers do. We actually, it's part of the strategies, there's many steps to the strategies with these crimes, and one of them is waking passengers up. It's a little easier for an officer in uniform to say, hey, you okay? So I would be careful how we do that, but given the circumstances, that would be something I'd consider.
Last question for you. Now that there's more uniforms in the subways, I often go up to them, introduce myself, and say thank you for being here and for protecting ourselves. Should I shut up or should I keep doing that?
You can never do enough of that, and
That's okay?
it's what we encourage our officers. Anything we can do to bring down that barrier that sometimes a uniform places between us, both from the officer to our members of our community, and from the community. It's something that I've encouraged for years, and thank you for every time you've done it, Mark.
Usually when I do it, I identify myself as Tom Prendergast, though.
Chief, I notice that not only are your men and women making more arrests, making significantly more apprehensions in one category or another, but also that the crime statistics continue to rise, and that we have now reached past 2006 and we're approaching 2005 statistics, if you look at page 3.32. It seems that electronics continue.
Chuck, I'd like to refer to that page before we continue. If
Sure,
that's okay.
go ahead.
You talking about the average crimes per day?
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
Let me focus on two aspects of that, if I may. One is a major culprit both here and in Metro North seems to be, and Long Island Railroad, seems to be the electronics that people carry. I wonder if a suggestion can be made, perhaps it would require legislative action, to provide that when you have a tracing component on the smartphone, as they have on at least all Apple phones and Apple iPod Touches and the rest of them, and I assume they have them on the Androids as well, that cannot be wiped out. And that can be done by using the California initiative of the legislature providing that no such instrument can be sold in the state of New York unless it provides that you cannot wipe out that important tool, because the result is if you know where it is, you will frequently be able to apprehend either the peddler or whoever stole the thing. It seems to me that there would be a useful purpose served if perhaps your command could take a look at that as being a potential tool, and then maybe we can get some legislators to do the necessary to enact such legislation. Because if you know where the given iPod that was stolen or the given iPhone that was stolen is, you frequently can make, as you have made, arrests to deal with it. Is that something you and your command could do? Take a look at it?
Take a look at it would be, of course we would take a look at it, and I welcome any, I'll look at the information you gave us, and maybe we'll have a conversation after this on more. And
One approach, Chuck, would be an alternative. I think the California approach is an affront to civil liberties, since I don't want Google to know where I am 24/7, which they have the ability to do. However, if the cellular companies decided as soon as you had something stolen that it will destroy the insides of the phone, which they have the capability of doing now, that would be a much better way of rendering the object useless.
Don't disagree at all. I think it's a good idea. The second part of this I'm sorry? The second part of this... The second part of this, if I may, is a concern I have. There's a combination here of three events, as I see it in these numbers. They are, one, the electronics, two, the assaults that are sometimes attendant to the theft of those electronics or the sleeping passenger, and three, the fare beaters. During the Giuliani administration, one of the major focuses there was, and successfully so, on the squeegee men. And my concern is, shouldn't we be doing exactly that in this area so as to crack down, especially in the courts and especially in the prosecution, because you're making the arrests on these kind of incidents, because they will clearly spread across the system. I mean, you've seen an increase in the trains in exactly the same areas.
Chuck, in other words, you're saying that the focus on quality of life is equally as important to the focus on actual looking for criminals who commit specific
Correct.
crimes, and I agree, and it's something that we insist on, in our deployment meetings on a weekly basis, and as we do with CompStat, to make sure that we're, like I had mentioned, utilizing all tools available for crime prevention and enforcement.
Chief, the cameras that are installed in stations, do they have a view of the turnstiles?
Yes.
So what about, I mean, I don't know how many of these we have. We have 486 and then 468 stations and then passageways and mezzanines. I mean, you have a lot more entrances than you probably have thousands of entrances. But if you had a public information campaign that said, beating the fare, you may be on camera or something like this, just let people know that we have a view of the turnstiles, that might do something.
That's something to consider, Andrew. That would be done, I guess, in conjunction with the MTA, and of course we could look at that.
And just to play to what Chuck was saying, I am confident that most of the people that are stealing these electronics didn't pay their fare. They probably came in because, crime is their forte. So just as you've captured people with bags full of guns because they didn't know how to use the MetroCard vending machines and they jumped the turnstile, this might be a way to stop some of this crime at the turnstile.
And that's one of the reasons, like when I had mentioned in my report, that team-led special operations are a standard procedure now. It's something that we've started in the last few months. And like that day I mentioned where everyone focused on theft of service, and we'll continue where it's theft of service, it's enforcement on trains, on mezzanines, and as well as uniform presence and crime prevention. I mean, those are some of the main components. The balance that the COs strike and we strike is when to focus where and at which locations, and that's something we work with and try different approaches every week based on our intelligence.
Jeff?
How much do we lose in fare evasion each year? I thought a month or two ago I saw some astronomically high number. I don't know if you've answered this before, and I don't know if that was related to buses or subways. We talk a lot about subways. I know you were mentioning specifically buses. How much do we lose? And how do you even
I believe
come up with
there's a
that?
range. There's a range, and the range not only is a low in subways to higher in buses, but higher in certain parts of the city in buses. I believe the number is between 50 and 75 million. But on the bus side, on the rail side, the number is relatively low in terms of percentage. And we have statistics available to us by international groups that we participate with. And we're in the middle of the range, middle to low end of the range in subways. We're at the upper end of the range in some parts of the city on buses. And that's one of the reasons why the chairman met with the police commissioner, because, as you know, the Transit Bureau has got responsible for policing and enforcement in the subway, and the New York City Police Department for the bus side of the house. And on a budget of, you know, $4.4 billion for subways, but every dollar counts. So, but in terms of fare evasion exists at every system in the country. And that's why it's important to always measure yourself against the best in class. So,
Chuck?
Is there any particular part of the city where the fare evasion is greater on the buses?
We were a little surprised when we saw some of the numbers, and it does vary across the city. But in terms of the surveys we've done, and not 100% sample, we have the higher end of the rates in Staten Island, where there's a lot of school service and a lot of the fare evasion may be students, and then it's arguable as to whether or not it's actually, you know, they just didn't swipe and they're trying to save one of their 3 trips for some other ride. But I think one of the things we want to do is come forward at a later date with a more comprehensive report rather than just make anecdotal comments with respect to fare evasion, because I don't think anybody on management's side, whether it be at the MTA or the agencies or the board, treats it anything other than serious, because every dollar we can save from fare evasion is a dollar we can spend for other things.
Is it a fair statement, though, that people that beat the fare on buses, since they're not swiping, the fare box is not registering that ride, and so that route could register less riders?
Well, first of all, that's why we need a comprehensive presentation, because there's different forms of fare evasion. There's an outright fare evasion where there's no fare paid. There's what you call a short drop, which is some money deposited against the fare. But in terms of, I'm not sure exactly what the intent of the question is, but when it comes to determining level of service on ridership, we do not use fare revenue as that source. We use separate rider checks that are done by checkers from operations planning. So even if, for argument's sake, on a given route we had a high level of fare evasion, it isn't the revenue deduced that determines the level of service. It's the number of riders counted on that bus.
Number of
with
riders
a checker
observed physically
on the bus, both in terms of riding checks on the bus as well as point checks alongside on the street.
So fare box has nothing to do with it?
No, it has nothing to do with level of service provided.
All right, Chief, thank you for your usual thorough presentation. Turning to something that's almost important, finance, Tom, are we making or losing money?
Preliminary April 2012 fare box revenue was $304.2 million, 1.3 or 0.4% above budget. Year-to-date fare box revenue was $1.2 billion, 1.9 million, 0.1% above budget. The average non-student fare in April 2012 was $1.63. In constant 1996 dollars, the average fare fell from $1.38 in 1996 to $1.07 in 2012.
You hear that, folks? $1.07. Statistic.
Preliminary April 2012 operating expenses before depreciation were below budget by $3.1 million. Labor expenses exceeded budget by $16.7 million, due mainly to the unfavorable timing of MABSTOA pension payments to pay for investment settlement costs and higher overtime requirements. Non-labor expenses were below budget by almost $20 million, due mostly to the favorable timing of several expenses and paratransit insurance underruns. Year-to-date operating expenses were $15.2 million below budget, and labor expenses were higher than budget by $23.6 million, due mostly to overtime requirements and the timing of MABSTOA pension payments. Non-labor expenses were favorable to budget by $38.8 million, again due to the timing of several expenses and paratransit insurance underruns. Ridership in April 2012 totaled 195.7 million, a half a percentage point above budget, and year-to-date ridership was 778.6 million, 0.3% above budget. The average weekday subway ridership was 5.4 million, an increase of 2.4% from April 2011, and once again, it's the highest April average weekday subway ridership in over 45 years. Average weekday local bus ridership was 2.1 million, an increase of 1.1% from April 2011, and weekday express bus ridership was 44,000, an increase of 5.8% from April 2011. Average weekday paratransit ridership was 31,000, an increase of 5.3% from April 2011. The preliminary May 2012 total fare box revenue was 1.4 million, 0.4 of a percentage point above budget, and the preliminary May 2012 operating expenses were unfavorable to budget by 11 million, due primarily to higher retroactive wages resulting from the recent Amalgamated Transit Union arbitration ruling.
Well, at least the ridership public likes us. Those are huge increases.
The numbers continue to do well.
Huge increases. Chuck?
Let me see if I can clarify something that was a problem that you resolved the other day for me at least. As I understand it, on buses, there was a period of time where bus ridership increased quite dramatically, and that the declines that occurred over the recent past are from that high point, never reaching the point of a level playing field of years past. Is that essentially correct?
That's essentially correct. Is that, Peter?
Right. There was a significant increase in ridership in 96, 97 with the introduction of the free transfers and unlimited ride. Was pretty much stable from 2000, slightly down, but relatively stable 2000 to 2008. And then the last 2 years was down a bit, but we're still significantly above where we were prior to the big increase. And it looks like it's stabilizing now this year again.
Is that we need to take the reductions that we have focused on in the past several meetings and put them in the light of the fact that they are reductions from a high point and not reductions from the average. It's not, putting aside the fare beaters, it's not the situation that some of us had thought.
Somebody else have a hand
I
up?
did.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make something. I just want to make it clear because in relation to Andrew's question about service, how service is scheduled. These numbers, however, these numbers you just recited do reflect fare beating. I mean, the actual ridership is probably a little bit higher because there's people riding. We're not counting because they're not paying a fare.
These gross numbers of ridership are generally derived from revenue statistics.
Right.
The level of service provided in terms of the schedules that are cut is a separate issue.
Right.
Yes.
I know.
Yes,
so when we
correct.
look at total ridership for the agencies over the it's probably
likely to be. It could be a little higher because it wouldn't take into account the effect of ridership due to fare increases. Right. But then you ask yourself the question: if they were required to pay the fare, would they actually ride? So
there's an adjustment somewhere in between, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, when we publish our ridership figures, they're a little bit depressed, then slightly, I would say. Our overall ridership figures.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But once again, I'll go back to the issue: if somebody knows for a fact they have to pay a fare, and they're challenged to pay a fare, and they don't have the money, they may walk.
That's why it was very surprising to hear you say. And I know it's per rider, and there's a lot more subway riders than bus riders, but that it was higher per ridership on buses, where you're actually challenged by somebody right at the door, as opposed to the subways, where there may not be a clerk anywhere. Back door, I understand.
At the front end of my career, Andrew, I drove a bus for 30 days and qualified as a bus operator in Chicago. And let me tell you, it's one of the most difficult jobs. And if you want to work midnight to 8 by yourself on a bus and challenge somebody for a fare, we require people to challenge once for a fare versus sitting in a booth and calling someone if someone doesn't, pay a fare. So it's a very, very complicated issue.
I've actually been on a bus in New York where somebody came in the back door and the bus operator said, "I see what you did. This bus is not moving until you leave." And she pulled the bus over, and the female bus did not move, and the guy went out. This was about a month ago. I'm not suggesting every bus operator do that, but...
Chuck?
Permit me a suggestion, if I may. We now have cameras, as I understand it, in various of the subway stations, and they are pointed at the turnstiles and the areas where people pay. Personally, I don't like cameras. I find them the same invasion of privacy as that to which the chairman referred. But could we also put a screen up front so the people who are beating the fare know that they're on a camera, know that they're being watched, and know that they're being the subject of observation. Seems to me deterrence has a plus here.
There's a whole host of actions you can take in levels of enforcement to try to change human behavior. And I would dare say the cost associated with putting a screen up and the ability for that to change behavior may be a very large cost versus different types of enforcement action you can take. If you come up to a red light in the middle of the night and you don't want to wait for it and you have a high likelihood you think that you're not going to get stopped by somebody, you may run it. If there's somebody there and they know people are running it and you know you're going to get a ticket, you'll change your behavior. So the answer to your question is one that we really have to take a look at. But the cost associated with putting equipment on buses is exceptionally high.
Not on the bus. I'm talking about the subways. I understand the bus cost, but if we put the screen up near the turnstiles when they come through and there's a fare beater, he's going to see himself on the screen, and that may be a deterrence. I really hearken back to the finding that was made in the Giuliani administration concerning the squeegee folk. It seems to me that this may be a plus. I ask you to look at it because
We'll take a look at
the
it.
cost may be worthwhile.
We'll take a look at it.
For 10 years, in every bus in Paris, there are 6 cameras, 4 on the inside and 2 on the outside. And for the first time, it's now used as a revenue-raising source because since the communication is open between Central and each particular bus, advertisers such as department stores now flash on the bus. You are now passing Printemps department store. Here are our specials for today. Get off and shop. Something for you to think about. Okay. Do we still have a capital program, Fred? Remember,
Yes, we do.
Fred, my bet is, and I expect you to help me out here, is that you will have countdown clocks on the B-line finish before the Bridge and Tunnel Authority, B Division, I'm sorry, has all those arms moved at toll collection. Now, I expect you to help me win this bet. I got 50 cents riding on
All right,
this.
we'll keep trying. Okay. Looking at the capital program results, commitments during the month of April totaled $42 million, including a project for the installation of cameras on buses to improve passenger employee security, rehabilitation of underground power substation hatchways, that's the access to the substation in subway locations, and the installation of equipment to support the deployment of an intelligent vehicle network at 5 bus depots. Meanwhile, in April, completions totaled $61 million, including conduit and cable work in support of PA CIS installations on 44 stations, 2 segments of the track and switch program for 2012, and the completion of a small business mentoring project which repaired 3 stairs at the Saratoga Avenue station on the New Lots lines. 2 other points of information: we completed the work on the platform at Dyckman. The southbound went back in service last Sunday, and we just opened up elevators at one of our key stations, East 180th Street in the Bronx, servicing the 2 and the 5. That completes my report.
Thank you, Fred.
I would like to add in response to your question, Mr. Chair, that we do expect to come to one of the CPOC meetings this year with an updated report as to how we intend to put not just countdown clocks but automatic train supervision in some level, shape, or form for the B Division.
Okay, we got $88.5 million to spend, Steve?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Good morning. The procurement package this month, which presents both New York City Transit and MTA procurements, includes 16 actions totaling $88.5 million in expenditures.
Procurements are in the book. Does anyone have any questions on any of them? Chuck?
Referring to page 5.8, I'm specifically referring to the Aon, Siegel, and Mercer contracts. Why were they not competitively bid?
They were initially competitively bid. This is a budget mod where we're infusing additional money into the existing contract, which is within the existing term of the contract. So we have an engagement with these 3 firms, and we're just infusing money into it. But they were all this particular procurement that we're infusing money in was a competitive procurement.
When?
Initially, when we awarded it back in 2009. and it expires in December 2014. So we're within the original term.
We gave a 5-year award for this without...
Correct. And it went to the board.
Okay. I have one other question, if I may. This is on, if you're ready for it, Transit Adjudication Bureau. Who does the adjudication? Is it CGI, or who does the adjudication?
CGI actually does the administrative work. The actual adjudications are done by per diem administrative judges.
The question I want to focus on with you is, I am told that there is a very significant backlog within that bureau in terms of their addressing pleas, letters that they get explaining things and the like. And my request is, could you take a look at that? That has been reported to me by 2 elected public officials.
Sure.
We'll do it.
All right, thank you, Chuck. The motion has been made to approve the procurements. Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Steve, service changes is next?
Peter Cafiero.
Hi. In Section 6, we present 2 bus service changes for information to the committee. The first is schedule changes planned for implementation in September 2012. This is part of our regular review of bus schedules throughout the city. We're proposing 73 schedule changes on 59 routes. They're part of our ongoing schedule review and based on revised running times and changes in ridership in conformance with the MTA Board approved guidelines as discussed before. These are based on actual passenger checks of these routes. We do look at ridership changes from the fare box to, in some cases, back up those actual counts, as well as look at flag areas that we need to follow up with checks. But the primary source for the schedules is actual observations of people on the bus. This month, in this package, the actual net cost is an increase of $1.7 million annually, primarily resulting from increases we're now seeing on express buses in Staten Island, and so we're adding service there. The second item is one that that was talked about last month at the Bus Operations Committee. It's jointly with MTA Bus out at Kennedy Airport. The B-15, Q3, and Q10 buses formerly had a terminal at Terminal 4 at JFK, which is the major international terminal. The Port Authority and the terminal operator are reconfiguring that terminal, and so they've moved our terminal location over to Terminal 5, actually adjacent to the old Terminal 6, but it's the AirTrain stop that serves Terminal 5, which is the JetBlue terminal. So we worked with the port to do that, but we had very short notice of the actual change, so it went into effect on May 30th. This is the formal notification to the board for information of that change.
Congratulations. You appear to be the only government agency that successfully works and communicates with the Port Authority. Very well done. Chuck?
2 things, if I may. First, by way of clarification. Am I correct in understanding that while community boards and other organizations received these scheduled changes last Thursday, Friday, or sometime late last week, they are nonetheless given the opportunity to comment on it over the course of the next several weeks at least, since they do not take effect until September, and that while those comments may or may not be considered, they do have the opportunity to continue
That's correct.
doing that.
That's correct.
The second is a question, if I may. Would you do me a favor and take a look at why it is that the Bronx 10 had an increase in headway in the morning peak, while across the board elsewhere there was a decrease in headway?
That's based on where we saw the ridership changes, and we can get you more detailed information on that. Okay.
I was just trying to see if Chuck was right, and he is.
I feel like I'm giving the exact same speech every time we have these. I actually was handed a speech I gave in '91, and it sounds amazingly like what I'm going to say today, which is, this is why we're losing riders in our bus system. We keep chipping away at our bus system. There are many more subtractions in service than there are additions in service. Is it any wonder that folks are abandoning the bus system when we...
This is an increase this time.
No, it isn't.
Isn't this an increase in total cost?
Right here. 73 changes.
It's costing us $1.7 million.
Right. There's 40
decreases,
reductions and 33
some odd
increases,
increases.
but the net is up 1.7.
So it's just hard. I mean, if last month or whenever the last time we did this, I believe Peter told us that bus inspections were done every 3 to 4 years. In this, it says it's being done every year. Has that change actually been made?
No, I'm not sure what you're specifically looking at. The express buses we do every year and have for a long time, and that's because express buses is very sensitive to ridership. We need to have schedule a seat for every passenger on an express bus. Local buses, we on the weekdays we look every other year, and on the weekends it's 3 to 4. It's
Andrew,
4 to 5 years.
in the late '80s when we instituted the service guidelines, and I think you were around. You weren't a board member then.
I was around.
Since then, we have very regularly, rigorously, 3 schedule changes a year been applying those. If we don't apply and fine-tune pluses and minuses, we can't live within our fleet requirement, we can't live within our bus operator requirement, and we'll just be adding service. What's really important, though, is as a route's ridership grows, if we can't add service, we will degrade the quality and level that service and chase riders away. And one of the ways to do that is to fine-tune routes where we have more service on the street than what the capacity is needed.
Is it fair to say, from what you just said, and I believe Peter enunciated this several months ago, in order to add service somewhere, you have to take from someone else?
Not necessarily, because there were years when we were adding service when the budget picture was differently. But in the case of the applications of these, since I've been back in 2009, it's been the regular application of the service guidelines, the 3 times a year, and there's a combination of puts and takes. It just so happens with the economy and the reduction in some of the ridership, there have probably been more takes than puts. But
isn't it September? I mean, I understand the summer light riding schedule. Children aren't in school in many cases, but this is September now. This is when people are actually going back. This is when ridership you would expect would increase, and yet we have more decreases than increases.
In response to the specific question Chuck asked, we took ridership checks, and actually the ridership is lower on that route. And once it goes below a certain level standard, as you know, at the max load point, then we pull back service. We change the headway of that service.
Do you think every 3 to 4 years is an accurate recognition of the service on a given route?
The weekend is every 3 to 4 years.
Right, but there's a lot of weekend diminutions here.
There are times we will look at it more frequently to 3 to 4 years if we have ridership complaints that we've cut service too much. It's not that simple. We got to give you the presentation again, Andrew, seriously, because it's, operations planning. It's not a pure application of a science. It's a combination of art and a science.
I'd love to think that's the case, but...
We just gave the presentation to board members Ferrer and Merdler just last week to try to make sure you understood. A lot of the other board members have had these already because they've gone through a series of cuts over the course of the last 4 years.
Thank you, by the way, for doing all those special briefing sessions for board members. Everybody is welcome to volunteer and come to them if you want to. Chuck?
First, let me express my personal thanks for that presentation. It was not only informative, it was extremely helpful. I have a question for you, which is sort of rhetorical. Am I correct that were it not for the constraints, which are serious, of economics, not having the money to do it, that if we introduce sensors in the buses, we would be in a better position to have an accurate count as contrasted, and a cheaper count in some respect, than the manual process that we now have? In other words, when people get on and off the bus, it'll count them physically. Whereas now what you do is you have to primarily rely on people standing in the street and doing a count of that.
The state of the art of technology has gotten to the point where there are automated means now to count boardings and lightings by vehicles, whether they be rail or bus. And we're looking at those because they're a more accurate and a more comprehensive way of being able to generate origin and destination data.
Thank you.
Chuck, what happens if somebody gets on the bus, they said, oops, I'm on the wrong bus, and gets off?
Minor departure from a standard number isn't going to change it. Whether the person's a fare beater or getting on and off, you're going to have a gross number that says it's either greater or smaller than it was before.
Stop. You want to get me in a lot of trouble, don't you?
Okay, I'm going to make sure that we continue to look into these new ways of counting passengers in any way we can.
Right.
You're up, Michael, if you're ready.
That's right.
Okay. Fulton Center, on June 4th, we opened the permanent passageway between the AC station and the 4-5 southbound platform. And at the same time, we have removed and closed the temporary passageway that customers are using for their transfer. We are currently installing the facade glass, the Fulton building, and this is very important because once we do that, we're going to be able to start the finishes work inside.
How do you get those suction cups to unsuck?
Carefully. Well, I'm more worried that they will not actually adhere well than unsuck them. This is the Day Street entrance. This is across the street at the corner of Fulton and Day, and this is proceeding on time for that to be finished next month. This is the AC mezzanine that is open and operational. This is actually, the ceilings are installed, the lighting is actually quite good, and it's a very pleasing atmosphere. And this is a picture of the dome, and just so you know that the skylight glass has been installed, so this is actually, that's continued to be finished. The number 7 extension is actually, it's a little longer. Just wanted to give you an overview where we stand. This is actually just gives you a picture of where 11th Avenue is and the various facilities, 34th, 35th. This is the side J, where the main entry point will be. P, that is actually under contract, will be under contract in July, and side K, that is actually will be finished ahead of schedule, in effect. The Site J contract, and this is something I wanted to point out, we're utilizing an approach, we call it, it's actually the Building Information Management System type, that what we do is we're able to weekly build this, so we will know what to expect and what will be done. And this is fully loaded in terms of schedule as well as quantity. So this is really a good tool for us to work with. This was a picture May 26th. June 9th, you can start seeing what is being built. June 16th is being added. June 23rd, keep going. And this is what we have. And now we are transferring it to show you what in reality is now. And this has been actually already transferred to the next contractor, that area, for the finish. Site K, this is we're also measuring it in a different way in terms of productivity, and this is again using the same type of approach. This is the eastern part of 11th Avenue. We're working on the other side, and that's being built 1 week at a time. And what has been added, and we're doing that in order for us to be able to understand where we stand every week and compare it with reality. And again, we are looking then at pictures to see what has been accomplished vis-a-vis what we actually predicted that it will. And this is a look from the other side. We're right now doing the cladding on that. Site L, that this is up around 41st Street. Again, the same thing. We are looking at the progress of the concrete. That is a very important component of it.
And then again, we are looking to see how we progress. This was May 26th. And the blue was what's already expected to come along. And this was the second floor. And then we call it the penthouse on the building. And that's where we are today. Again, looking at May, how it looked, and then in June, and in fact, this is a different look of the same thing, and that allow us to transfer that again to the finishes contractor. The finishes and systems contractor, this shows you how the tunnels look like. We already installed universal brackets. That's actually something relatively new that we have put in place, and the Transit Authority accepted that. This is actually in the station itself. Again, we have the brackets installed. This is at the end of the stations where we are putting the masonry work for the variety of support facilities. This is a look of the tunnels, the way they are being worked on. Again, this is some track work looking west. And this is actually, again, the permanent track construction. Okay, let's go to 2nd Avenue. 2nd Avenue is actually, let me just talk a bit about the various things. Up north in the 96th Street area, the work that includes a lot of slurry walls as well as secant piles is proceeding well, and by August all of that would be completed. The turnover of the contract 1 to contract 2A was completed, and we awarded actually clearly the contract 2A, and the work is proceeding at this point very well. At 86th Street Cavern, and now I would like to go to some of the this is the board tunnel rock surface, but just keep going. The tunnel waterproofing and invert concrete are in place right now, and this is looking down towards 63rd Street. The 63rd Street connection, and you have one tunnel down here and the one up. So these are tunnels that are going to be on top of each other, and this is where the crossover occurs.
It's invert concrete. It sounds like
It's the invert. The invert is the floor. Okay, so this is being it's just a pretty common term for using for sewers and everything else. The floor area, the lowest point. And keep going. This is 86th Street Station Ancillary. The Chase Bank building was demolished. It's right here on this side. This is being built right now. This is the new type of marking system that is being put in place that will have a scrubber as well. That is yet to be there. I think one of them is being installed this week, and another one is going to be in a couple of weeks. We are doing all of the blasting started, but not in the just at the beginning of the blasting, and that will be starting in a couple of weeks in a much more intense fashion once we have all of the things in place. The 72nd Street is about 85% complete right now, and expecting that by the middle or end of July we complete all the cavern and tunnels, and then we'll still have additional blasting at the various facilities, ancillary facilities that we have along there. Overall, the project is continuing on time, and I actually mentioned it that at the 96th Street Station, we have awarded right now, last Friday, the last contract for systems and finishes for the 96th Street Station. So that one is truly moving on towards its completion. That's about it.
questions for Dr. Haratnachanu? Didn't think I could say it, did you? Chuck?
Quick question. Quick question, if I may. Is it possible to provide that as you build these things, whether they be the 2nd Avenue subway or the 7th, number 7 line extension, that we build in at the same time the internet or telephonic capacities so as to make it possible for people down the road to have that facility?
I guess the answer is probably yes, but we are abiding normally. This is part of, we're providing that as directed by New York City Transit, that is our client. When they request that that be incorporated, we'll put it in. I'm not sure. Bill, can you shed some light on that? Can you just...
It would be done under the systems contract and the communication element if we were to do it at all, and it would be, revising the antenna specification to be able to transmit and receive whatever communication devices we would want. I don't know what we called for, and we submitted our original spec requirement.
You used the words, if we do it at all. Are you suggesting we're not going to have internet or Wi-Fi accessibility or telephone accessibility in the subways?
No, as Tom pointed out, under the systems contract, we have one project-wide systems contract, and we are installing conduit and raceway for all the communication systems. As far as the exact type of systems, as far as internet and wireless capability, that'll be determined over the course of that contract. Most of those systems are not going to be installed and operational until the testing in 2016.
So that the riding public can confidently await the next decade before they get that kind of facility?
Chuck, it's very possible, due to security reasons, cellular service is something that we should actually talk privately about because of the bad guy aspects of it. Thank you.
All right, if there's no further questions, we will close the New York City Transit portion of the committee, and we will start the MTA Bus Company portion in just a few seconds. In 5 minutes, we will start it, and the record should reflect that we have caught up to the schedule. Thank you all very much.